Why has Air New Zealand been willing to be one of the leaders in the area of using biofuels?
Our proposition to our customers is all about being the greenest airline in the world. We fly mainly tourists coming to visit New Zealand, and they come to New Zealand because they see it as a very pristine environment, and we want the airline to reinforce that image to our passengers, and we believe biofuels is a big part of that. It can reduce our overall carbon impact by about 40% when you look at the full life cycle cost of the or production of the fuel. So we believe it's an integral part of the future for aviation.
Now, earlier this year you did do a test flight using biofuels. Can you tell us more about that and how that went?
Yeah, sure. So we used a fuel called Jatropha. We mixed that in a 50-50 blend with jet fuel, and we ran a 747, one engine operating off that biofuel mix and the other three engines operating with a normal petroleum-based jet fuel, to compare the performance of the engine or the engines on those different fuels, see what the performance was at altitude, see what the performance was when we simulated an engine shut down and start up and so on, to ensure that there was no adverse impact either on the performance or the wear and tear and so on of the engine. So after that test, the engine was stripped down and we looked at all the elements. The results were fantastic actually. We did that test in conjunction with Boeing and Rolls-Royce, and they've evaluated all the data, and actually the performance of the biofuel blend was slightly better than normal Jet A1, and that's the start of a process to get certification by the various regulatory authorities to being able to use biofuels in commercial aviation.
How far away do you think you are from being able to use biofuels on a day-to-day basis?
So I think in a technical sense the process will take 2 or 3 years in terms of being able to get certification. In terms of the logistical infrastructure, to have tanks, to have pipelines, to have feedstock and refining capability, it really is a 5 to 10 year project before it's going to have a material impact on the aviation sector, and it's likely to start in domestic applications rather than international applications, where you have a much greater degree of complexity because of the different airlines flying with potentially different fuel requirements.
Now, apart from biofuels, what are other actions that you're taking as an airline to be green?
Sure. There's a huge amount you can do with your aircraft today. I mean, for example, we just put wingtips on our 767s. By putting those wingtips on, we're saving per aircraft 1.3 million litres of fuel a year. I mean, it's just a huge amount. 16,000 tonnes of CO2 we won't produce by just putting wingtips on our aircraft. Putting zonal dryers to take all the moisture out of the insulation blankets inside the aircraft, which takes weight off the aircraft, which uses less fuel. We're flying with different operating procedures to reduce the fuel burn, reduce the drag. We're taxiing on one engine. We're not using our auxiliary power units on the ground. We're using ground-based electrical power and so on. It's amazing how many opportunities it's just taking weight off the aircraft. To fly a kilo of weight from Auckland to LA, one of our major routes, takes half a kilo of fuel. So the more weight you get off the aircraft, the more fuel you save. In our own environment, our ground-based environments, we're looking at all our recycling practices and so on as well. So it's become a real passion throughout the company, and voluntarily now over a third of our staff have signed up to what we call the Green Team, which says they'll agree to live both in their private life as well at work to a certain criteria in terms of their green practices and so on. So people are really embracing this as something we need to be a part of.
Now, as far as it goes, at the end of the day, you are still trying to run a business. You need to make a profit. Is there a conflict between trying to reduce emissions, between trying to be green, and being able to be profitable? There must be lines where those two things don't necessarily meet.
Yes and no, actually. We see commercial rationale on two bases. Firstly, fuel is our number one expense in our business. 1.7 billion New Zealand dollars was our fuel bill last year, and we only made just less than $150 million of profit. So huge opportunity commercially to reducing our fuel burn. But more importantly than that, ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, we're predominantly a tourist airline. We attract people to New Zealand to have an environmentally clean experience and holiday. We believe that if we get this right, people will pay a premium to fly on an airline that has a smaller impact on the environment compared to another airline or another mode of transport. So we actually believe as a value proposition that this is an opportunity. We genuinely don't see it as a threat. And so we're embracing it and saying, let's get out there and stand apart and embrace this as something that, as I say, will enhance the perspective of Air New Zealand as a premium airline on the world stage. And
do you find that customers do, vote with their wallets, that they embrace this and they say, I'm willing to pay maybe a little bit more?
We do. What we found, and you see a lot of people refer to the lack of success of carbon offset schemes, of saying you can pay a carbon offset when you fly with us. People we find, are a lot less interested in paying some money into a black box and they don't know how it's spent or where it goes, but they will actually pay a premium if they think they're flying on an airline that is doing tangible things that they can relate to, they can feel, they can touch, and make them feel better about their flying experience. So we are getting a very positive impact, and we're seeing it in all our brand monitors, and we're seeing it in the attractiveness of New Zealand as a destination and Air New Zealand as an airline relative to our peers. So the tangibility of measuring that is quite difficult, but certainly intuitively we believe it, and we've structured our business strategy around that.